That's dorky old me. You know, it takes a special level of dork just to be willing to bring out the finger guns. That was already equipped with that type of equipment, but the tuxedo t-shirt, I had a special order that. And yes, this is brand new. I did just special order this off of Amazon for this moment. So thank you so much for giving me this platform to be able to relive some childhood dreams, my little Robbie moments of wanting to be a spy. Honestly, when I was a kid, one of my favorite songs was Secret Agent Man. Anyone else respond and relate with that? I mean, late 80s, early 90s, pretty much every little boy, their favorite song was either Secret Agent Man, and they were doing somersaults and spying on their little siblings or their, not neighbors, that's creepy, weirdos, or something like that. It was either that or they were pretending to be like a ninja and they were singing that song. Everybody was kung fu fighting, and then they had like, like little ninja moves or something like that. For me, it was both. I loved being a kung fu fighter and ninja, but I also loved the idea of being a spy. So Secret Agent Man was a favorite song of mine, but the reason I think it was one of my favorite songs was also because I literally thought that the lyrics weren't Secret Agent Man. I thought that they were Secret Asian Man. And if you listen to the song, I literally thought it was like Secret Asian Man, and I was like, apparently they made a soundtrack for my adult life, and I've discovered it at 7 years old. This is amazing. I'm clinging to this. Imagine my disappointment when I discovered it's actually Secret Agent Man. Lame, not as specific, but still I can make it work. I love the idea of being a spy, and it's because a spy has they open that portfolio, and inside of it is anyone? A dossier, a mission, right? Spies have a mission. And I love this idea of mission. I always have. If you know me at all, then you know this about me. I'm a little obsessed with being on mission. And I think that it comes from my mom. You know, my mom, y'all, is my absolute hero. And here's a picture of my mom as a little girl who grew up in Korea. She was born and raised in a small little village, literally living in shacks like the one behind her when she was a little girl. She grew up in a little village right outside of Seoul, South Korea. But my mom is my absolute hero. And I was talking with her a little bit, and I was like, Mom, tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up in Korea. And I asked her a question, and I said, why don't you tell me what is the nicest place that you ever lived in Korea? I knew that she lived in some pretty humble spots, some shacks and shanties, but I was like, what is the nicest place that you ever lived in? And she told me, she was like, at one point my dad bought a house. And I was like, well, that shatters all my paradigms of what I was expecting. But then she explained to me that they actually had to rent out most of the house in order to be able to afford it. And they just kind of lived wherever they could around the house. And her spot was the attic. And my thought was like, that kind of sounds cool. I've seen those movies where like the teenage kid has the cool little vibey spot up in the upstairs attic, and then she starts to explain to me what this attic really looks like. She tells me that she has to climb up a ladder that's on the outside of the building to get in through a little window, and then she would crawl around on her stomach to get around. She told me that when she would lay on her bed, which was just a blanket on the ground, there was probably about 1.5 feet of space between her and the ceiling. I realized that my mom's nicest place that she ever lived in as a kid in Korea wasn't an attic. It was really what we would usually call a crawl space, something that we maybe put some wiring or some plumbing through. But that was the nicest place my mom ever lived in as a child growing up in South Korea. But my mom was on a mission because she didn't want that to be the story for the rest of the generations that would come after her. She had bigger dreams for them. And so she decided she was going to do something different. And so she started saving up, and when she was 17 years old, she actually moved to America by herself. And she came to high school. Yeah, my mom's an inspiration to me. She's a hero of mine. She comes to America, goes to high school, and finishes high school with a tape reel voice recorder, an English to Korean dictionary, a Korean to English dictionary, and an English to English dictionary, just to be able to make ends meet and try to get through it. She finishes high school, goes on to college, and gets a degree in mathematics. I'm like, something's not adding up. I couldn't do that, Mom. Like, she gets a degree in mathematics. She goes on and gets 2 masters. I know, it just keeps going, right? She gets one in business and administration, and then another in computer science. And then for the last 35 plus years, she's been serving at a high level. She's gonna retire at the end of this month. But she's been serving at a high level for the federal government, for the Army, for the Navy. She's done all kinds of different things. She's worked on supercomputers. My mom has been someone who is always on a mission. And she had a mission when she came to America. She came to this country with a mission to change things for generations that would come after her, starting with that of my brothers and I. My mom was on a mission. And I think even her sense of mission is really what drove her to become a Christian in the first place. Because when I was less than a year old, 1985, I was born June of 84, and 38 if you're wondering. You guys are like, you look 16. But nonetheless, my mom actually decided I want to be a different kind of parent than the parenting that I grew up with, but I don't have any other examples or perspectives other than the ones that I've been given. So she started looking around for help on how to be a different kind of parent, and she arrived at Jesus. And Jesus didn't just transform the type of mom she was. He did that, but he transformed everything for her. He changed everything that her life was all about, to the point where all of a sudden she was not only on mission that was her mission, or even mission for her generations and families that would come after her, but she was on God's mission. And listen, my mom was the type of person who woke up at 4:30 every morning just to pray for my brothers and I, to pray for the community around us and the circumstances happening in the world. My mom was always on mission. My mom's my hero because of it. She's the reason why I think I am so focused on the mission of God, is because I saw an example of a woman who lived with full abandonment to the mission of God. And that's what we're talking about today, is this idea of mission. Now, that word is kind of scary, yeah? When I talk about that word mission, it can almost be like, oh no, like Brandon's out of town, and now they're gonna let the crazy guy that's gonna tell us that we have to be like the Christian A-team or something. If that's the case, then I call being Mr. T because he's got a cool haircut and nice jewelry and that van, right? We're like, is he going to actually tell me that I need to evangelize more and make me feel guilty for not doing it? Give me some 5-step process on how to win someone to Christ or something? Tell me about how I need to go to the mall later on and tell people about Jesus? And some of you are like, I can't tell the difference between the Christian call to evangelism and those guys at the mall kiosk that are chasing me down to rub some anti-aging ointment on my hand. You know what I'm talking? Some revolutionary hairspray that they're going to spray on your head as you're walking by, and you're like, don't spray me. You know what I'm talking about. If that's the picture that you have, then there's probably some people in this room that's kind of pumped about that, because you're like, I've been waiting for one of these services where we issue that call, and then I'm ready to stand up and say, I'm going to sell it all and move to Timbuktu, and I'm going to go and change the world, and I'm so excited about it. But the rest of us are like, please, please, please don't be one of those services. Please, please, please don't tell me that I need to sell everything I have and move to some extreme, obscure part of the world. The truth is that the mission of God is so much bigger than the pictures that we might have. Oftentimes when we think of a missionary, we have this picture in our head. Isn't that true? We have this picture. It's like that guy with Teva sandals and cargo shorts. He's raising money to build a well in Africa or something like that. But the mission isn't just those organizations that we support during the Christmas offering. It's not just those things. Those are vital and important parts of the mission of God, and I'm grateful that God is doing those things, and it's exciting and inspirational. But the mission of God is so much bigger than all of that. The mission of God is so much more inclusive than all of that. It includes you and I, but the sense of mission is at the core of the story of God. This book right here, the Bible, is a whole story beginning from end about God himself reaching into a broken and disenfranchised and disconnected, rebellious humanity and calling them back to himself and reestablishing his kingdom reign over all creation. You see, when it very first starts, he gives us a picture of what it was supposed to look like in the very beginning. And then from the moment that Adam and Eve fall, God is on a mission to bring us back. When Adam and Eve fall in the garden, he goes and he searches for them, the Bible tells us. And then all throughout the Old Testament, he sends prophets and kings and leaders and judges and all different types of people to be agents of his good news, his gospel message that says, come back. This is what you've created for. This is is where you belong. Come back into my presence, because the Bible says in his presence there is fullness of joy. And ever since then, our God has been on a mission, even to the point where he loved you so much that he sent his one and only son, Jesus Christ, to create the ultimate path of reconciliation. And then Jesus built his church. That's us. The breathing, living, spirit-filled, purpose-filled organism of the church, all Christians all over the globe at any given moment. And they're called towards a mission. And it's not our mission. Man, there's a release, a pressure in that. It's not your mission that you have to maintain. It's not my mission that I have to maintain. It's God's mission, because we have a missional God. And our Bible is a missional book. And the church is a vehicle of that mission. It's God's mission that we get to join with him on. And that's why we're calling it the co-mission. Perhaps you've heard of it called the Great Commission, and it's a little bit of a play on words because the word co means with, like co-worker. We're on a co-mission. We are invited to join with God on the mission that he's on to reconcile humanity back into his perfect purpose for everyone's lives. And so what does this mission look like? Well, I kind of mentioned it, but perhaps you've heard it called the Great Commission. It's the call. The mission is arguably most vividly found in Matthew 28, verses 19 through 20. And so would you stand with me as we read these last two verses in the gospel account of Matthew? And we're going to stand almost as if you're being commissioned for the mission today. Read along with me, starting in verse 19. It says there, therefore go. Oh, that's a hard word. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you to the very end of the age. You may be seated. Now, if you've never heard this, the Great Commission, then you're not alone. And some of you are like, what are you talking about? Of course I've heard of the Great Commission. Well, get this, Barna Group, which is an organization that actually does research studies to determine the current state of the church, mostly in America, they actually did a study and found that, listen, only 17% of church-attending Christians in America can identify and define what the Great Commission is. I'm going to say that again. Only 17% of church-attending Christians in America can identify and define what the Great Commission is. And maybe this is an issue of just the word Great Commission. We don't recognize that phraseology all that much anymore. But no matter the cause, if we're struggling to identify it, much less to define it, then how could we possibly be any good at accomplishing it? Follow-up question, why is it even important that we accomplish it? You ever think about that? Why is it even important? I heard because Jesus said so. I love that. Also, studies show that between 4 and 14% of people in San Diego County are Christians. You say, why is there such a range? It's like 10% range in there. It's because we're in Southern California. We can't make up our minds. But no, there's all these studies, 4% to 14%. Most of the numbers err on the lower side of that. I think if we take a look around, we'll see that that's probably true. 4 to 14% of people in San Diego County would say, yes, I follow Jesus with everything that I am. I am a Christian. But let's just be generous and go with that 14% number. Even if we're using that 14% number, it means that the need or the opportunity is massive. It's huge. It's ginormous. Listen, there's 3.35 million people in San Diego County. And if we're going with that 14% number, that means that just under 2.9 million people are people that you will drive past on your way home today, that you will walk past on your way into the store, you'll wave at as you pull into your driveway, and you're probably going to work with tomorrow morning at work. All those people have been grasping and looking for true and lasting hope and healing. And they've turned to all the things that you and I, if you found Jesus and found him to be true and lasting hope and healing, have found that all the other things that you looked at before were a ripoff. And the ripoff is real. Because in 2020 alone, get this, there were nearly 1,000 deaths in San Diego County from people who took so much drugs and alcohol to try to cope with what they were dealing with that they died. There's almost 1,000 people that live in our city that died from drug and alcohol overdoses. 419 people intentionally committed suicide. 129 people were victims of homicide in San Diego County alone. This week, over 22% of Americans said that they were depressed last week. Over 22% of Americans say, I experienced depression last week. I could keep on quoting numbers, but these aren't just numbers. These are people. These are someone's children. These might be your children. These are someone's spouses, siblings, coworkers, friends, best friends. These aren't just numbers. This isn't just an opportunity. This is something that we've got to get engaged in because people are looking for hope and healing. And we know that the answer isn't Jesus. And people keep on searching for it in different places and they're falling short because the ripoff is real. We've got to get engaged because the mission matters. It's those faces that Jesus saw when he said, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Listen, Jesus came to this world and he saw hurt and he decided that he was going to be on a mission for healing. He saw despair and he said, I will be the way, the truth, and the life. And I'm going to reconcile you back to the Father through me, through my sacrifice. Jesus came to this earth with a mission, and now he invites you and me to be on the mission with him. This is the call of Christ. This is the mission that we're talking about. It's God's mission. We have an opportunity to join with him on it. I wonder, do you want to be a part of that? Do you want to be a part of that? I do. I do. I want to be a loving and life-giving church who brings hope and healing in Jesus' name. And here's how Jesus instructs us on what that looks like. He says in Matthew 28, verse 19, he says, go and make disciples. Now, what's a disciple? I know someone is probably already thinking about this seminary definition that they've heard before. Maybe they're writing down something they've heard in a podcast. The truth is that this idea of being a disciple is something that we can and often do really overcomplicate. Isn't that true? Let me make it really simple. I used to play a game called Simon Says as a kid. You guys play Simon Says ever? You probably did, unless you're super young and then all you know about is Roblox or Candy Crush or something like that. But Simon Says is really simple. Basically, there's a leader and he says something like, Simon says, clap your hands, and then everybody. Oh, there's like 4 of you that know how to play this game. Simon says, clap your hands. I'm trying to get some applause here. You guys are too nice, too nice. And then maybe the leader switches it up and he says, Simon says, raise your hand if you're going to give Robert $100. No, it's so simple. It's so simple. And we get it when Simon says, but when Jesus says, I love what someone that I really love to listen to, his name is Francis Chan, says about this. He says, when Jesus says, we just memorize it. We just study it. Just talk about it, think about it. We don't do it. When Simon says, it's simple, but when Jesus says, I have 3 little girls and they all share a room. If I tell them, go clean your room, they don't come back to me in an hour and go, memorize what you said. I can say it in Greek. I'm going to invite some friends over and we're going to talk about what it would look like if I were to clean my room. Dad, I was looking up the historical and cultural context of the word clean, and I realized that it's often used as an adjective. And so because you've declared it in your authority, oh Dad, that my room is clean, then I can just rest in that promise. I'd be like, go clean your room. Go and actually do it. Sometimes we overcomplicate being a disciple almost to the point where maybe we don't even ever become one. because we just talk about it. We just memorize what he said. We can conceptualize it, but we're not called to be just hearers of the word. We're called to be doers also. We're called to be engaged in what Jesus calls us to do, to be obedient to what he tells us to do, because that's what a disciple does. A disciple doesn't just memorize what Jesus is saying. A disciple does what Jesus commands. That's what we're called to do as disciples. And you want to know a really simple direction on how to be a disciple of Jesus Christ? Matthew 28, it tells us, disciples make more disciples. And they do it as they go. Now that word go is problematic. That word go might even be a little bit terrifying, right? Because how can I go when I have so much to do right now? How can I go when I have so much responsibility right here? God, I'd love to go, but my kids have soccer practice and I got bills to pay, I have taxes to pay and a business to run and so much to maintain. I mean, how can I go and continue to be responsible in the things that I'm supposed to do right here? And the reason why I think that we might get faced with this limitation is because we get hung up on what we're doing or where we're doing it, rather than why we're doing it. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes it becomes a limitation because we get hung up on what we're doing it, where we're doing it, instead of why we're doing it. Let me kind of tell you that we have a call from Christ, and I know that that call is radical, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to call you to do all those radical things. It doesn't mean that he's going to call you to move to Zimbabwe. That's a fun word to say. I almost had a hard time saying it. He's not going to call you to go to all these different extreme places. Maybe he's going to call you to continue to be a light right where you're at. God isn't necessarily going to call all of us to sell everything that we have and go somewhere remote. He does, however, call all of us to give all that we have and all that we are to him. Now, this is where I need to give myself a lot of grace, and I hope that you receive the grace as well. Because one of our values as a church is that we're journey-minded, because we have to need that to be a value. We need that to be there, because none of us are arrived. None of us have this all figured out. We're all trying to figure it out as we go. We're constantly seeing more of our lives and figuring out how to give more of it to God. And so don't worry if you don't have it all figured out. I sure don't. But there should be a guide for us as we're looking to figure this out, as we're growing on this journey. And if you look at the screens with me, we're going to read together 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. And it says there, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Now, I looked up that word whatever, and you know what that word whatever means? Whatever. It just means whatever. And whatever is expansive enough to include you being a parent. Whatever also includes the way that you are an employee. Whatever even includes the simple everyday tasks of the things that we do. The example that this word gives us is eating and drinking. We can transform the everyday things that we do if we're willing just to do it for a different purpose, the scripture tells us. If you're taking notes today, then absolutely write this thing down. Being a disciple of Jesus isn't often accomplished in the extreme. It's usually done in the everyday. I'm going to say that again. Being a disciple of Jesus usually isn't accomplished in the extreme. It's usually accomplished in the everyday, in the everything, in the every moment, in the every bill that you pay, every errand that you run, every conversation that you have, every connection you make. And I think sometimes we can get caught up waiting for the extreme things to come along, or waiting for the extreme opportunities or positions or that word to come along that's going to fire us up. But what if we just were willing to let God transform everything that we do, but we were able to transform it for a different purpose? Because the word says, so whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do it all what? For the glory of God. You can do the things in your life that you have always done, but you can do them with a different purpose, with a different intention, with a different motivation. You can do them for the glory of God. You say to yourself, how can I do those things for the glory of God? Well, let me give you a really tangible example by sharing with you a confession. because I'm a parent of 3 little girls, and oftentimes I find myself parenting my kids just to be less annoying. Is that relatable to anybody else? But what if I was willing to be more intentional as a parent? What if I was willing to say, no, I'm gonna parent my kids for the glory of God today? Maybe the lesson of the day wouldn't be stop fighting, stop whining, stop crying, stop complaining. Those are great lessons, but maybe instead it would be start loving one another. Start being grateful to God who gives you more than you deserve. Start to esteem others as better than yourself. You know what would happen if I started to parent with that kind of intentionality? My kids might just become better disciples of Jesus Christ. We can transform the everyday things that we're doing, the spots and the positions that you're already engaged in. You can transform the way that you do them when you transform the purpose that you do them for. Do them for the glory of God rather than just a maintaining of your own comfort. Transform even the mundane things like eating and drinking. Do it all with the mindset that you're going to be a light in the middle of darkness. That word go in Matthew 28 is all about intentionality. It's all about motivation. So I'm not going to tell you today that the mission means that you must go somewhere else, because chances are that God needs you to be a light right where you're at. And here's the crazy thing about this. If you want to have a far reach, if you want to light up things far away from you, you've got to shine bright right where you're at. I almost grabbed a flashlight that was really bright that I knew could put a spot right on the back of that wall in this well-lit room, but I decided I didn't want to blind anyone. So I decided to forego that part, because the light that's bright enough to actually reach the wall back there has to be really, really, really bright right here. Listen, I know that you want your life to have meaning that reaches really far from who you are and where you are. The way to do that is to start shining bright right where you're at. Start shining bright right where you're at, right where God has you right now. Start shining right in that spot. And it's so simple. You want to know how to shine bright where you're at? Read this. Get to know what Jesus tells you to do, and then do it. Do it. Actually do it. Don't just memorize it. Don't just study it. Don't just talk about it. Actually be people that would do it. And in order to shine to others, that means that we've got to be less committed to individuality. Oh, that's hard. And we've got to let our faith be something that we do on display. It seems like in our world, we've bought into this lie that some things are good for you and things are good for you and things are good for me. But, and so because of it, we've kind of relinquished our Christianity to something that we just do that's good for us, and then other people can have what's good for them. Is that true? We've got to live our faith on display so that people know the goodness of God in our lives. We've got to be bold about being followers of Jesus Christ. Now, here's what I'm not saying, because I can already see it now. I'm not saying go on Facebook and show everyone how spiritual you are and how right you are because you're a Christian. I mean, if you want to, knock yourself out. But that's not what I'm saying, okay? What I am saying is be willing to be so loyal to Jesus that you're willing to tell everyone about it. Saying be willing to show the world that you are different because you are a child of God, but then they have an invitation to be different alongside with you. That their lives were made for a purpose and a mission as well. Be bold that you're a follower of Jesus Christ. Jesus says, make disciples, and then he tells us the next part, he says, baptizing them. Now, if you've ever gone through our baptism class here at Rice City, then you might even mouth this with me. You know that sometimes we define baptism as an outward expression of an inward commitment, right? An outward expression of an inward commitment, or some kind of verbiage like that. Basically, what it's saying is that baptism is a piece of communication that tells the world that you follow Jesus, he's your king, and you're loyal and faithful to him. And this is something that we get when we're brand new, right? When someone first gets saved, they're excited about it. They'll tell anyone and everyone with ears, I found the best thing ever. His name is Jesus Christ, and he's given me hope and healing, love and life. Man, you've got to know him. When you're brand new to everything, you're excited. There's a zest and a joy that's coming out all the time. And this is true spiritually. This is also true naturally. But sometimes we just kind of grow out of it. We get mature, reserved, polite, considerate. But have you ever noticed that kids aren't? That they just don't seem to have any type of limitation on just being whoever they want to be to whoever will listen and watch. And I was fully intending to show you some videos of my kids, maybe of them singing some Frozen songs in princess dresses, or maybe one of them dressed up like a superhero, complete with the underwear on the outside and on their head as a mask. But I decided that one day they're going to grow into the embarrassment. And I didn't want to do that to them. The truth is that we get this when we're young, and so the word says to baptize them. And I love that expression of baptism because I've never been to a baptism that bummed me out. We just had a baptism at the Bay, and one of my favorite things about it was that people were coming out of the water, and they weren't doing this, which is what we do so often every other day. When they come out of the water for baptism, you can understand that they've actually found Jesus and he's bringing joy into their life because they're high-fiving and they're hugging, they're cheering and they're laughing. There's an exuberance because they have found Jesus and he's changed everything for them. And now they can live a life more abundant, more full, more purpose-filled, and they can experience the joy of their salvation. Man, baptism is a great time to do it, but it shouldn't be the only time that we do that. I once heard a comedian talk about why he's not married. And he talked about it and he said, you know what? If married people treated being married like they did getting a jet ski, I might be more likely to get married. Because people who have a jet ski, you see them out on Mission Bay and they're like, woohoo! And they're like loving life and everything. And then you see people that are married and they're like, got to go home to the old ball and chain. And he's like, why would I want to be married? I wonder if we aren't showing people how good it is to be with Jesus. Or if we're just saying, I've got my rules. It's just another thing I do. It's just a part of my life. Praise him. We've got to tell our faces that God is good. We've got to live it out that God is great and that he's always so good to me, like we just sang. We've got to actually live like that's the truth. And speaking of which, making disciples is not just about that first step, like baptism isn't just the only time that we should show people that we're joyful about what God has done in our life. Making disciples isn't just about that first decision. But the truth is that I think we can pigeonhole evangelism into being about only one part about making disciples, the very beginning. We can make evangelism only about that first initial decision, but evangelism, discipleship, making disciples is also about helping people continue to make decisions. Not just the first decision, but also the second, the third, the 100th, the 1,000th, to continually decide that they're going to live a life to be obedient to all that Jesus has commanded them. Jesus says first, number one, the mission is to make disciples. Number two, baptizing them. And then number three, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And this part takes relationship. It takes walking with someone every day, every moment. It takes encouraging people, as Paul puts it, to imitate you as you imitate Christ. There's a responsibility in that to live a life worthy of the calling and then walk with others so that they might also learn to obey all that Jesus has commanded them, to have a consistent commitment to the things of Jesus, to have a consistent commitment to the mission of Christ. It takes walking with them every day and every moment. It takes longevity. And here's the cool thing. It doesn't necessarily take being this super outgoing person. It doesn't have to be charismatic. It just takes relationship and willing to do life with one another. And I hope this is what happens in our groups. This is definitely what happens when a few of you get together for coffee and pray for one another and celebrate what God is doing, but also walk with one another when you're facing hard things. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited about what God is doing in our women's ministry because this is happening. You see, the leadership of our women's ministry, they have a vision to pair up women with other women for the sake of mentorship. And so now there are women, many of times they're the ones that have been walking with God for a long time, that are meeting with other women, and they're teaching them, and they're meeting with them just to learn how to be a disciple day in and day out, moment in and moment out. This is a huge part of making disciples, and I promise you that because this is happening, that the light is getting brighter in San Diego. Because this is happening, I promise you there are disciples being made in our city. Those statistics that I read out at the beginning of our time today aren't the end of the story. And it's not because some well-known evangelist came and did something exciting or extreme. It's because somebody was willing to walk with others in the everyday. That's powerful. That's inclusive. That includes you and that includes me. This is the mission that God has, and he invites us to be a part of it. But we can't do it by ourselves. And perhaps you're hearing this charge, you're hearing this call, you're hearing this opportunity, this mission that's in front of you, and you're thinking to yourself, well, what if I'm too weak? Well, God says, this is my mission. And so he reminds us, I am with you always, even to the very end of the age. Well, what if I don't have what it takes? That's okay. This is my mission. And if you're willing to join in with it, then you'll be with me and I will be with you, even to the very end of the age. What happens if I don't have it all figured out? That's okay. This is my mission. And if you're willing to do it, then you'll be with me and I will be with you, even to the very end of the age. We have a God who is on mission to bring you back, to bring the people you love back, to bring the people you don't love back. He's a type of God that will go into the darkest moments, the darkest situations, the darkest night, and he'll light it up. He will light it up. And so we're going to sing this song, and it's called God of Revival. And as we do, I want to encourage you today. Let's make this a declaration for us. Let's make this a declaration of how our God is on a mission to change everything, to make light happen in dark places, to create hope where there was once despair, healing where there was brokenness. Let's make this a declaration that we are with him. I want to ask you again, do you want to be a part of God's mission to reconcile this world back to him? Do you want to be a part of it? Would you stand with me and declare these words as we sing this song? We have a God of revival. Let's sing this together.